I'm Mary Dealman, a longtime member here at First CRC in Grand Rapids. When we completed this beautiful new addition at church, it was decided to somehow reflect our history somewhere within the church. And so we formed a committee of longtime members who have a love for history and began this process with Gary Ryder, Pat Talon, Wanda Cowan, Judy Paxton, and Donna Siplinga, and myself. Over the next 3.5 years, we sifted through a lot of material, read, researched information on the 165 years, and came up with the idea of using 7 panels to reflect the 7 tenets. We owe a huge thank you to Valerie Cowan, one of the daughters of our church, who had professional graphic talents to put our ideas onto these 7 panels. We worked with Universal Sign Company, who was commissioned to do all the signage in the addition, especially the endowment board, to match that. Only a very small amount of our history is reflected on these 7 panels, but the main thing we learned is that each stage, each congregation strove to do God's will. We hope this is enough of an introduction that encourages you to come to the building and read the panels yourself. Panel 1 is dedicated to the first 55 years of our church's existence. Religious turmoil and famine in the Netherlands led to a surge of immigration to the new land of opportunity. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 by President Andrew Jackson forced Native people off their tribal lands and opened up West Michigan to these new immigrants. Dutch pioneers led by Reverend Van Raalte came to the Holland area in 1847, setting up the Reformed Church of America. By 1850, there was lots of issues of dissension. These were not taken lightly, and by 1857, a group within the Second Reformed Church in Grand Rapids broke away to form our church and was joined by 2 Holland area churches to start the Christian Reformed denomination. Panel 2 is the next 110 years of our church building. The process of moving a congregation took over 6 years with many difficult decisions. The finding of 3 empty lots in an adjacent home for sale on the corner of Henry and Bates near Calvin Theological Seminary, located on the corner of Madison and Franklin, was important and helped us decide on this location. Our congregation had a significant tie to the seminary. The struggles are well documented in the Centennial Book of 1957. The goal was to have a sanctuary that had seating for 900 members, with the possibility of adding a balcony if 300 more seats were needed. The organ and the members moved into their new church building on March 1912. By the centennial in 1957, membership had increased to 1,007 souls. But redlining in Grand Rapids led to a changing neighborhood, and some churches were relocating to the outlying suburbs. Again, with prayer and meetings, it was decided to commit to staying at 650 Bates, with the addition of the large fellowship hall and tearing down the houses to build a parking lot behind the church. During the past 65 years since the centennial, many building improvements and additions have continued, striving to be a good neighbor and a light on the corner of our new address, 651 Franklin.
When the civil authorities in the Netherlands didn't allow the establishment of Christian schools, many were motivated to emigrate. The first continuous school started in Second Reformed Church in 1856. The next year, when the group left, they took the school and only teacher, Mr. Adrian Plune, with them. It was about 10 years later that the William Street School was finally built. Now, running this school, now owned by the True Dutch Reformed Church, our church, wasn't easy. There were so many challenges, including lack of qualified teachers, not enough materials, never enough funds, and huge decisions to make, like when to begin teaching in English instead of the Dutch language. Now, this William Street School closed in 1905, and that ended the 50-year run of the church-owned school. Following that, our church strongly supported Baxter and Oakdale Christian schools, where the majority of the church's children attended.
The Dutch immigrants craved community, belonging, purpose, and they found it within the church. Starting with the formation of the Young Men's Society way back in 1870, church societies filled their need for learning, service, and fellowship. Early on, the groups had to receive consistory approval to meet and were led by the pastor. This was common as the pastor had the most biblical knowledge and was likely the most educated. The children were also not to be overlooked in religious instruction, as Sunday school began as early as 1873, and then pastor-led Heidelberg Catechism. Besides holding Bible studies, societies were very service-oriented, looking after the needs of those in the congregation and those serving on the mission field. Across the top of panel 4 is a picture taken of First Christian Reformed Church on June 1939. They were at a church picnic. It shows a large white congregation with Pastor Bunema posing in the center. A lot of the men are wearing ties, the ladies with their pocketbooks, the church ball team in their Bates Street uniforms, a large group of children sitting on the grass, probably anxious for the photo shoot to be over so they could play. On this day, possibly having celebrated the fact that they had weathered the Great Depression, were they aware that in 2 short months a significant war would start? That the Netherlands, the former homeland for many, would become occupied by the Germans? That this church would send 100 members to war? That a significant wave of Dutch immigrants would again arrive in the States and Canada, repeating the need to find community? First Christian Reformed Church proved ready to answer the call to help.
We're all aware that the history of missions in our church, as well as the Church Universal, must be approached with humility, for there have been many missteps along the way. Deep commitment, for that was never in question, that the church was committed to spreading the gospel of Jesus. After 2 years of passionate, prejudiced arguments in committees, church periodicals, and on the floor of synod, the denomination chose China over Africa as the first location for our foreign mission efforts. Our church agreed to call and support a missionary to China. There were already 8,000 Catholic and Protestant missionaries in China, but the Presbyterians were willing to give us a spot which had proven too difficult for them. Unfortunately, our mission took on the look and practice of Dutch CRC churches in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and therefore made little headway in an entrenched Buddhist culture. Interestingly, the work that was reportedly most fruitful was carried out by two women, one who was the local Bible woman named Wu, and they carried out their teaching among the children. The mission was disrupted in 1927, 1937, with World War II, and then with the Communist Civil War. Our last evangelist pastor was imprisoned in 1967, and the church disappeared. But the Spirit did not. These missionaries toiled faithfully, suffered hardships, and inspired future missionaries. We are learning more all the time the importance of recognizing that reciprocity, respect, and appreciation of cultures are integral to being the hands and feet of Jesus around the world. Our church's emphasis has become more on supporting the use of individuals' gifts and callings to specific work, ministering around the globe.
Between the 1950s and the 1980s, First Christian Reformed Church would be consumed with two challenges to their existence and ministry: white flight and women in office. A changing neighborhood in color and culture dropped church membership from 240 to 120 families. It didn't help that Calvin College and the Christian High School would also leave the area in the next few years. But Reverend Van Rees succeeded in challenging the congregation to carry through on their plans to add an expensive addition, even though some described the church as dying. That addition signaled that the church was staying put. A significant change in ministry vision turned the congregation's focus to the surrounding neighborhood as their mission field. God provided the pastors they needed in Pastors Beelan, Terpstra, and Klopp to make the pivot, but the congregation had to work hard to make the vision a reality. Many new outreach programs were tried as congregants walked the streets, handed out the Bridge newsletter, started children's programs, offered assistance, and invited the neighbors in for a midweek meal. The church got a membership boost when young families, looking for a church that was dealing with social justice issues and favorable to the women's movement, saw what First Christian Reformed Church was trying to do to be relevant in a changing society. By staying put at Franklin and Henry, First Church took a leap of faith, believing they could make a difference, showing the love of Christ. Ensuing pastors, evangelists, community workers, and council members continued the vision and helped change the membership into a heterogeneous body of believers. It was a powerful witness that not only could the church coexist in a changing community, but that a loving relationship between church and neighbor could be established.
This panel speaks to the church's challenging changes. One of the most divisive issues spanning 30 years involved the women's role in the church. At First Church, women were first allowed to vote in the congregational meetings in 1971. 4 years later, council recommended calling the Dorcas members, who ministered in the neighborhood and districts, deaconesses. They would be elected, but not allowed to attend or vote in council. Due to the fury that this caused, the idea was rescinded. A small group of women began to attend council meetings as observers. And in 1978, the CRC Synod allowed women to serve as deacons, but the next synod declared a moratorium on this. It wasn't until 1982 that synod allowed female deacons, and they were elected at first. Well, what about elders? Throughout several reversals by synod and heated debates about authority and headship, First Church attempted to use women's gifts as associate elders to stay within church order. And this is something that didn't go over very well with synod. In 1995, our church made the difficult decision to elect women as full elders, an act of ecclesiastical disobedience. 5 months later, synod declared that women in office was neither a confessional matter nor one affecting salvation, giving congregations the freedom to elect women elders with permission of their classes. And then finally, in 2001, Reverend Kathy Smith was installed as our minister of congregational life. Reflecting on the past 165 years, we see the Spirit leading through prayer, caring, and mutual love, guiding us into being a more inclusive body of believers.
We wanted to end our panel with hope, and we chose this testament from Our World Belongs to God because it was co-authored by Morris Gray-Donis, who was a pastor here at First Church. He put his heart and soul into developing this confession, Our World Belongs to God. And we chose section 12 from that, and that goes as follows. Even now, as history unfolds in ways we only know in part, we are assured that God is with us in our world, holding all things in tender embrace and binding them to His purpose. The confidence that the Lord is faithful gives meaning to our days and hope to our years. The future is secure, for our world belongs to God.